Hello, everyone, and welcome today to our webinar. You have reached change.org, and we have some really exciting content for you today. We are really honored to have all of you with us to talk about how change.org has built and managed the world's largest advocacy email list. And it's going to be a combination of great content about telling powerful stories, meeting your users where they're at, and optimizing to keep your list happy. We have a packed agenda. My name is Lawrence Grodeska. I will be guiding us through this agenda, and I'll introduce you to my colleagues that will be presenting today in a minute. We'll talk about some of the core email principles that we use at change.org. And again, we'll talk about telling powerful stories, how to make sure that you're delivering the right content to your users wherever they are, and how to optimize your list. We'll have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. So you'll see in the ReadyTalk conference window a chat window on the left-hand side. Please ask your questions in that chat window, and we'll flag them for answering later on in the webinar. We will be recording this webinar. It'll be available on YouTube later on. We'll send that out afterwards so that you can review, share with your colleagues, whatever you'd like to do. We will be tweeting at ChangeList, the hashtag, where we'll be sharing some of the highlights of the webinar, and I hope that if you find any interesting tidbits about how to manage your email list, please share them there. We'd be delighted to see some conversation happening. Also, you can ask us questions there if you'd like, and we'll add them to the question queue. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to two of my favorite colleagues in the world that do incredible work every day to empower individuals to create the change they want to see. First of all, my excellent colleague, Michael Whitney. He's the director of our U.S. email team, and he is the man responsible for the team that sends more than 500 million emails for user-created campaigns every year. Michael, thanks for joining us today. How are you?
Doing well, Lawrence. Thank you very much for having us here. This is going to be great.
Excellent. Yes, and along with Michael is Christiana Skolman, our senior email campaigner. Her specialty is storytelling and helping to tell the great stories of all the user-generated campaigns that pop up on change.org and getting them out to our users in the most engaging way possible. Christiana, how are you?
I'm doing great. Excited to be here.
Yay! I'm excited to have you here too. And my name is Lawrence Grodeska. I'm the Director of Nonprofit Community at change.org. It's my job to bring all of you out there in Weblandia the best content about making your campaigns online as effective as they can be. And we have a lot of knowledge about how to do that because we are the world's largest petition platform. We have nearly 50 million users from every country in the world, and it's our mission to empower those users, the people everywhere, to create the change they want to see. And we also work with organizations to empower them to connect with these great supporters to be more effective in the work that they're doing online. This happens around the framework of petitions that enable users and organizations to tell their stories and gather support for their causes. And our success on engaging people to take action on petitions and then to engage with organizations down the road really depends on inspiring folks and communicating with them to take action. And what we're going to be talking about today is email. It's a critical channel for us, just like we know it's a critical channel for you. And we've learned a lot in the last 2 or 3 years as we've grown to nearly 50 million users. And that's what Michael and Christiana are going to be talking about today. Hopefully it speaks to some of the challenges and obstacles that you've faced in managing your list and building your list. And to get us started and have a little bit of an idea about where all of you are at, we have some really great participants on the line from a host of amazing organizations. We had over 500 people register for this webinar from just inspiring and wonderful organizations around the world doing work in all kinds of amazing causes. And to understand a bit more about where you're at so we can deliver you the best content, wondered if you wouldn't mind sharing where you're at with your list building and list growth. How many people do you currently have on your email list? And this will allow us to tailor the content as we go along to meet your needs. And also just a reminder to ask any questions you have in the chat window on the left-hand side. And I see lots of responses coming in, and I just want to wait to get a few more responses. I'll show you the results because I'm sure you're always interested in benchmarking against other organizations. And it looks like the majority of you have lists around 25,000. Some of you are over 100,000, which is amazing, and really we identify with all it takes to get to that spot. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Michael Whitney to talk about how we've gotten to nearly 50 million users and email subscribers on our list. Take it away, Michael.
Thank you, Lawrence. As Lawrence said, we are at 50 million users worldwide. We have campaign staff in 20 different countries, and the United States list portion of Change.org is approximately 40% of that overall user base. And so that plurality of the list is what the U.S. email team, of which Christiana and I are a part, is managing a significant portion of that 50 million. And that 50 million is currently subscribed users.
Described
in order
as
to
active
manage,
users, right, Michael?
Say that again?
Described in active users, right?
Yes, those are people who are subscribing, have signed petitions, and are with us, not just anyone who's ever signed a petition.
Gotcha.
In order to manage that list, we have a team of 5 people in the United States doing email. We have 2 storytellers. We have 1 local and niche email campaigner. We have 1 email producer. And we have 1 traffic cop, which is me, who moves a lot of the pieces together for this list. We're supported by an additional 8 campaigners who work with our petition creators, 2 more people who work on the local and niche email campaigns, as well as a communications team of 4 people in the United States who work on communications campaigning. In 2013 so far, we've sent more than 250 million emails. We test about 100 new petitions every week, and 50 of those petitions approximately go wide every week. And by go wide, we mean they perform well enough relative to our benchmarks of what we consider to be adequate list performance in terms of signature rate and click-through rate in order to go to tens, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of people. In order to do that, though, we rely on some core principles of email. And by core principles, I mean, what is it that actually drives our program to make sure that we are providing the best user service possible of looking for what our members want and delivering the right kind of content to them. 3 things that we really value on the U.S. email team and at Change.org in general. Sending what matters to our members. By that I mean we want to send things that matter to them. Not everybody is going to care about the same set of issues. Not everybody is going to care about the same kind of petition. But everyone cares about something. We need to figure out what that is. But it also means sending things that can affect some real change. Change that can affect someone's community, someone's life, or something that can affect the entire world. In order to do so, we show why something's important. We don't tell. I very much value, as part of our work, not just saying facts, which may be important and which may be true, facts that are true, but instead drawing a picture of what a story is actually about and showing exactly how it affects somebody. You need to lay out the picture of who someone is, why they care about something, and not just assume that facts will win the day, because often you need to do more than that. In doing so, you need to be super clear about what it is, the issue that you're writing about, as well as how someone can affect change. A lot of organizations and people, myself included, will default to acronyms or assuming some intricacies of legislative policy. You have to assume that people are not going to necessarily be where you are in terms of your knowledge or your understanding of the space. And so spell it out and make sure that people can understand exactly what is in front of them. At the same time, you need to trust your members and your users with respect, both respecting their intelligence, respecting what issues they care about, and pretty importantly, respecting their inbox. I think about it as a privilege to be able to get into someone's inbox and to communicate with them in the most direct way that we can aside from text messages. Email is still very much an active part of how people interact with the internet, and they've granted license for you to communicate with them in your inbox, and so you need to treat that privilege with respect. You need to be honest about what's possible with your campaign and with your ask, what you're going to use money for, what signatures will do, why this issue is important, as well as remembering to celebrate success. One of the things that we consider to be just critical to our email program and to our overall theory of change for our for change.org is reinforcing that someone's signature does something. It's not just a signature on petition. It's a building up towards a movement where you either win the campaign, or even if you don't win, you can make a difference and know that the ground shifted even if your ultimate goal was not there. And so it's just super important to show exactly what it means when someone signs a petition, when someone makes a donation, when someone makes a phone call, and to show exactly what someone's impact can be once you get into their inbox. In short, great users deserve this great content, and it's up to you to follow and see exactly what your users want and how to deliver content. And Christiana can talk about developing the stories to do so.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So as Lawrence introduced me earlier, my name is Christiana Skolman, and I am one of the lead storytellers here at change.org. And part of why I love my job so much is because I get to help everyday people who come to the change.org website believe in the power of their voice by turning their words, into an email that inspires other people to act. And we do this primarily through powerful storytelling. So for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to walk you through some of the key elements to successful storytelling through email campaigning. And I'm going to cover how change.org uses storytelling as a key component of campaigning. I'm also going to go over the golden rule of storytelling, and I'm possibly going to make you do something embarrassing. And I'm also going to go over the most important elements of effective email storytelling. And I just clicked on the wrong button for the slide. There we go. So our focus on storytelling is pretty simple. We use stories in our emails because it's easier to connect to an issue through an individual's narrative. Identifying with the person who is seeking to right a wrong or stand up to Goliath is going to make the user feel like they understand that person's struggle and therefore the issue. And we do that because they're going to be more likely to take action. So in this example on the screen, this is an email from James Cromwell, and he wants Walmart to join many other grocery chains and restaurants by sourcing pork from suppliers that do not use gestation crates. Now, gestation crates is a pretty wonky term for someone who isn't a food or animal rights activist, so I approached this by leading with his emotional connection to the animals. Jumping into this email by talking about gestation crates from the get-go would lose people before the ask. By telling the story of the campaign through the lens of his individual experience, though, we've seen, and through users' individual experience in general through email, we've seen a really incredible increase in action rates, over a 40% better conversion actually. And this is compared to emails written from the perspective of a campaigner or emails that are populated by petition text. And this type of email campaigning also allows us to demonstrate the values that Michael touched on, like striving for user voice authenticity, truthful stories, and credible paths to victory. And we do this by working with petition creators to ensure that the email conveys what they want to say. Next slide. But what is a story? So if there's one thing that you remember from this webinar, I want it to be this. This is what I consider to be the golden rule of storytelling. This is I was taught before I became an effective email writer, and now I'm passing it along to all of you. A story follows the journey of someone who wants something badly and is having difficulty getting it. But what is important about this, right? So stories aren't interesting when somebody wants something that they're easily able to achieve. Stories also are not interesting when the person doesn't have a strong desire to pursue their dreams. Conflicts give story intrigue and depth and also helps the reader build a connection with the primary character. So now I want you all to repeat after me, even if you're sitting in a coffee shop with headphones on, or even if you're just alone at your apartment with your cat. A story follows someone who wants something badly and is having difficulty getting it. Thanks, Lawrence. So now I'm going to walk walk through how elements of a narrative build compelling stories based on this principle. The narrative needs to spark interest. What makes a character in a story appealing, right? In this instance, it happens to be a fairly well-known actor. So this isn't a standard example. Not all the emails we send are from people who are recognizable or have some sort of public notoriety. But nonetheless, when you're writing email, you need to pull out the details that will immediately interest the reader. You can build a connection between the reader and the main character of your story by telling the ways in which they've tried to accomplish their goals, right the wrong, or fight the evil. And you admire people for trying more than for their successes. They're interesting because they meet challenges with different approaches and keep trying even after they've failed. So in this instance, James Cromwell has been an outspoken activist for years, so you know he's been fighting for animals for a long time. Which brings us to the most important narrative element within the golden rule of storytelling that we just went over, and that is that a character having a problem creates sympathy, but a character seeking a solution creates empathy. Sympathy is to be aware of another's problems or emotional distress and to have compassion for them, to feel something for them, to see a situation and to say like, oh wow, I feel bad for that person or for that animal. But empathy takes things a step further by not only expressing compassion, but also showing a deeper level of understanding by entering into the other person's experience. A problem that sets up sympathy is necessary for a story. You need to elicit emotion in order for your readers to take action. But empathy is a necessary precursor to that action. Empathetic people intellectually commit to a day in someone else's shoes, and in doing so recognize the importance of standing up for others. Now we're going to go back to this email example we've been looking at, and I'm going to walk through how we achieve interest, sympathy, and empathy in our emails. We see that the personal here can have great power, right? Even if the goals are political. But for campaigns, think about using characters with these three basic elements. So in this case, James Cromwell is an Oscar-nominated actor and outspoken animal rights activist, like I just said. But that isn't interesting enough for you to care about what he has to say about Walmart and pigs. So why do we feel sorry for them, right? Since this is an animals campaign, this is kind of a different example than a human-based interest issue. But we want the reader to identify more with the struggle of the animal through the voice of the person advocating for them. So James Cromwell doesn't suffer personally from gestation crates, right? But he's emotionally connected to the pigs because of his experiences and wants us to understand why it's important to care. And then here's where the empathy comes in. So what do they do about their problem? In this case, James stopped eating meat after filming the movie Babe, but knew that wasn't enough. So he has done a lot of animal rights work for a long time, but animals are still suffering in horrible conditions. So now he's asking for your help by starting a Change.org petition. And we admire him for that fact because he keeps trying. But you can't have a compelling email that doesn't include what's at stake if the reader doesn't take action. So by setting up the stakes, you're describing what's at risk, so essentially what could be won or what could be lost. And an engaging, inspiring narrative that has stakes or implications for the outcome is going to up the ante for the empathy. The more specific, the better, too. We have to know what we're hoping and fearing for in the email in order to care what happens. And this is an example of a campaign that we ran, I think it was earlier this year. And it's a pretty clear example of how stakes compel people to take action. So you wouldn't care, this is actually about a little girl whose name is Sarah, and you wouldn't care about Sarah's medical needs if you didn't know that she would die without a lung transplant. And fortunately, because her petition was just totally took off on Change.org, she was able to get her lung transplant and she survived, and here's this really wonderful, heartwarming photo of her family with her after her transplant. But just because you're telling a story doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your theory of change. And theory of change is something that I know probably everyone on this call is pretty familiar with, so I'm not going to go into that too in depth. But I do want to touch on how it can be incorporated into storytelling. So in this particular email, James Cromwell talks about how a Change.org campaign pressured another company, Au Bon Pan, to stop buying pork sourced from suppliers who use gestation crates, which lends his petition and his ask more credibility. But it also weaves more empathy into the campaign, right? So more storytelling elements. James wants Walmart to stop using gestation crates, and he can't achieve that without your help. A tenet of our email program at Change.org is that we don't send impossible asks. And this principle helps us build positive rapport with our users. And user empowerment comes from success, so we can't intentionally mislead if we want people to believe in the power of petitions. So in conclusion, a story is your best email asset. Please, please strive to tell your character's journey that will elicit empathy, set the stakes for what will happen if your member doesn't take action, and your users will respond to those emails.
Thanks, Christiana. And I just want to actually chime in there before we move on to the next section. You know, one of my favorite parts of being at change.org is seeing all the incredible stories we have every day, from over 30,000 petitions started every month. And when you're at an organization and you have the issues that you're working on, you have your objectives, sometimes it can be hard to find the right stories, or it's a new challenge to find an individual narrative to fit with your issues. So it takes some time, but we've seen some organizations really embrace that storytelling, the personal storytelling narrative, to great effect in their campaigns. So just want to totally emphasize what Christiana has said and say that it's an interesting experiment to try as far as your content and your content creation. So would really encourage you to check out some of the emails that our email team sends, some of the petitions on change.org for some ideas, and we'd love to have a conversation with you after the fact if you have any questions about how to make this happen in your email storytelling. Great. So now over to Michael Whitney about meeting users where they are at.
Thank you, Lawrence. When I talk about meeting users where they're at, I mean that in the words of Ygritte from Game of Thrones in the Song of Ice and Fire, you know nothing. You don't know necessarily what motivated someone to sign their first petition. You don't necessarily know what their history is, what stories they have. The assumption that we start from when we look at a user when they come to us, or a member when they come to an organization, is we know what petitions they signed, and that is our one data point that we go off of. And so the challenge then in front of us is trying to dig into the information we have about what petitions they've signed, what that petition's about, maybe where they came from, whether it was Facebook or anything like that, and use the information in front of you to try to build a profile and make them a real person, and then try to figure out what is the best approach to giving them the content that they need in order to meet your goals. But from the start, assume that you know nothing. One example of change.org and our email list moving to where our users were was looking at how people read our email. And when we looked at the data, we saw that up to 40% of our users read the emails we sent them on their mobile devices, whether it was their iPhones, iPads, Windows phones. I'm running out of phones, but they read them on their mobile devices. And the problem was that the mobile experience for our emails was really not good. On an iPhone, you have to pinch in, then read the text, and then come back and try to find the sign button. It's just not an ideal experience. And so what we did was, without changing any of the kinds of campaigns we send, any of the ways that we write about campaigns, anything like that, we changed our templates so that they would read better on a mobile device, and make it so that you didn't have to zoom in or whatever else. When we did that, we saw an overall increase in signatures by 10%, just by making it easier for people to read their emails on their phones using some HTML in our mobile template, or in our email template. We were able to just increase our signatures by 10% and have a way that we can reach our users where they are. But before we get to a point of getting them to sign and making sure their emails are readable, you need to back up and make sure that you're getting them the kind of content that they really want. And the operating principle that I think is worth considering is, imagine that you can only respond to one email a day. You can only you get however many emails, and you can only open and click and take action on one of them. It may be Amazon, it may be a petition from change.org, or it may be an email from your grandmother. We want our emails to be so good and relevant to our users that your grandma's not going to get a response from you because the email that you send to your members is just so damn good that Grandma's going to have to wait another day to hear from you. There's a couple ways that we approach that from a segmentation perspective. Like I said, you got to take the information that comes in from the user's first signature about where they came from, what issue they cared about, anything else that you can glean from them, and then find ways to target them in order to get them the content that they really care about. We do that in several ways at the Change.org US email team. The first and kind of most basic one is if you're collecting someone's zip code, you know where they are geographically, where they say they are. And from that, you can see if they're going to care about something that's in Virginia, if they live in Virginia, or if they're going to care about something to do with the mayoral election if they live in New York City. At Change.org, with more than 30,000 petitions created a month, we actually have a really interesting problem that we had to solve around the sheer amount of petitions that are created that have to do with local issues. And what we did was actually we peeled off a team of people, 1 email person and now 2 campaigners, to look at all the local campaigns that come in from our users. And we're able to now send up to 20% of our emails through this kind of local and niche targeting, where we have things from state legislation to making sure that a governor either signs or doesn't sign a bill, or asking a state legislator to pass legislature to pass a bill. We also send out emails about, we'll see that a petition in Tallahassee, Florida gained 200 signatures to put a stop sign in at a dangerous intersection. And we'll find people within 2 miles of that intersection and send them a petition to put a stop sign in there. The users, people there may have signed a petition about a stop sign if that was the first one they joined by. They may have signed something about marriage equality. But you can use the information you have about a person and dig in and make it feel like you can create a relevant experience for that user, just based on knowing where they are. Another way that we segment at Change.org is based on a user's action history by the type of petition they signed, with a cause or issue area. Change.org for a while used a series of different causes: animal rights, environment, criminal justice, economic justice, human trafficking, etc., and would send emails based on the kind of petition that somebody first signed. The breadth of areas of petition topics that we have now goes as wide as animal rights and racial justice to something as unique and niche as video games, TV shows, or an all-consuming hate of Nickelback. I can count probably about 70,000 users we have who have signed anti-Nickelback petitions at some point in time, making us probably the world's largest list of Nickelback haters. But on a bigger scale, there's a couple ways that we can target by the area that someone has signed a petition in. We do this by if you signed any petition in the animals cause, you've signed any petition in economic justice. We also look at a way to target based on, of all the petitions you've signed, what cause area are you most interested in? Like, you may have signed one thing about stopping bank fees, but your other 10 petitions you signed might be in animal rights. We'll make sure to send you an animal rights petition rather than another economic justice petition. One thing that we've learned from the scale, though, of having 50 million users is being able to create patterns that are statistically significant of what causes are related to one another. For instance, we find that people who have signed an immigrant rights petition are going to be way more likely to sign a human trafficking petition or a human rights petition. Likewise, someone who signed a sustainable food petition about keeping out GMOs or something like that can be reliably asked to sign something about health care for somebody, or conversely signing a petition about the environment. So we have a broad way of cutting up these different lists. based on broad issue areas to something that, I believe we have close to 1 million subscribed people worldwide who have signed petitions about their favorite video games. And it may seem trivial, but at its core, someone wanted something badly and they had trouble getting it, and they came to change.org and create a petition. And now we have the opportunity and really the privilege to create them into activists who care about other issues as well. And so the thing with the scale of a 50 million person email list, though, is that we've had to get creative about how we can actually break up our users and try to guess better about what they want. Just because you've done something in one cause doesn't mean that you're, like, if you sign one petition about sports, we don't want to send you only sports petitions from here on out. And so we actually, in our San Francisco office, our engineering team we have several data scientists as well as some engineers. We affectionately call them the robots with the tool that they've built. But it's an artificial intelligence targeting system that, based on test results, can predict which petition you're more likely to sign out of a whole set of petitions. So if you have 5 different options, it can say, we think person A is going to want to sign petition 2 more than anything else. It's a neat little system. It's called Yosoku. It's Japanese for predict. And it's not something, this is not relevant to basically any of your lists, but it's a cool way that we are trying to innovate in terms of how to make sure that we're using all available options to get people the right kind of content. And this machine learning artificial intelligence system will hopefully be able to predict what petitions you want to sign with this great accuracy one day, as when you come to Amazon and it knows what kind of products or books or CDs you want to buy next. When we talk about why people take action, let's take an example of the Keystone XL pipeline. You may sign a Keystone XL pipeline because you care about the environment generally. It may be that you really hate Exxon or you really hate oil companies. It could be that your house is going to be taken by eminent domain for the pipeline to go right through it, like this petition here by a woman named Julia Crawford. And so what we try to figure out exactly what it is you care about and then make patterns based on what kind of petitions you signed. And part of what I believe in terms of the operating philosophy of sending people petitions and sending people emails and asking people to take action for your organization is actually that petitions that people have signed, actions that people have taken are not necessarily directly related to an affinity for your organization. It's actually a model. It's a representation of an issue that somebody cares about. And then therefore the petitions, the emails, and everything you do to communicate with those members is an extension of those issues. And the challenge is trying to figure out how to translate those issues and what people care about so they eventually have affinity completely for your organization, and that your organization becomes representative of that issue. Very few organizations have met that challenge, and I think what a lot of small organizations do is try to carve out and make their organization represent their issue, and build people who care about those issues accordingly. At the core of it, going back to you agree, you know nothing. And so the solution there is test. And Christiana is going to talk some more about that.
Are you saying we should be testing, Michael?
I think it's advisable. Maybe I should have put in one more test. I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, cool. And just the great overview of some of the nitty-gritty of how we segment and use past user behavior to deliver great content to our users. And that's really the takeaway here, is that using segmentation and past action history to hit your users where they're at with the content that they want is going to guarantee they're more engaged and more responsive to your issues and your important asks. So however you can do that, whatever testing methodologies and user behavior history you have, take advantage of it. plenty of things to talk about on another webinar about that, but something to strive for in your email program. Our last section here is going to be back to Christiana about how to optimize to keep your list happy and active.
And I will not be asking you to say anything out loud this time, but we will still be talking about email and email storytelling, but the ways that you can incorporate it into different aspects of your work. So what about storytelling on your landing page? Or what about storytelling on your petition page, right? So the main takeaway from this section is that storytelling doesn't begin and end in your emails, and that it should also be a principle that you apply to all of your campaign content. Now, in this example, this is a grandmother whose grandson accidentally put a Tide laundry pod in their mouth and tried to eat it because they thought it was a piece of candy, and ended up getting really sick, had to go to the hospital, almost died. And when she did a little bit of research, she found out that this is actually something that's happened across the country, and that there have been hundreds of cases of kids who've either become seriously ill or who have also died from mistaking these Tide laundry pods as candy. And the set of pictures that she put on the petition are great because they already do a little bit of the storytelling for us, but a picture alone can't set the stakes for a campaign or convey the reason why a user's signature will help. So this is an example of a storytelling brief that I put together for this specific campaign. And the original petition text was strong because it's an easy narrative to find sympathy in, but by breaking out some of the details of this story into an organized flow, like a powerful, emotionally driven lead and supporting information in the following first paragraph, we are also optimizing our content for users who might not be accessing the petition through an email. And I want you to think about that when you're crafting your content for other parts of your campaign. So thinking about storytelling beyond just the email. I also wanted to show you guys this because this is a good way to organize email outlines in general. And I highly recommend breaking down the core of your story by identifying that somebody wants something badly and is having difficulty getting it information first. And then you can use this as a bedrock of your story while writing your email and other campaign content. I've often found that when I'm tackling difficult emails or email campaigns, and I find myself maybe just like losing focus in my writing, that I will refer back to my 2 to 3 sentences on the somebody wants something badly and is having difficulty getting it to refocus my writing. But optimizing for your list is more than just having really great content, as we all know. You need to make sure that you're challenging the assumptions of your users, like what issues certain members might be interested in. So in this example, we knew for years that our list really struggled to respond positively to various campaigns around prisoners and prisoners' rights. But this summer, there was a hunger strike in the California prison system against solitary confinement. But a wife of an inmate who had been locked up in solitary for months started a petition on our site. And when we saw this, we were really excited, but we also assumed that it would flop like most campaigns of this nature have in the past. And what we didn't recognize, though, at the time is that the story was new and interesting and had higher stakes because there was a massive hunger strike going on throughout the California prisons, which is an element to this campaign that had been missing before in other similar campaigns that we had tried. And this ended up being one of our most widely sent emails in 2013. So this slide is a snapshot of one of my many inboxes and what it looks like every single day. And I want you to take a look at this screenshot and go ahead and put in the chat some of your favorite subject lines from here. So just maybe pick out one that stands out to you. And I also want you to think about whether or not some of these subject lines set you up for knowing what to expect when you open it. Like, after reading the subject line, do you know what this email is going to be asking you to do once you click open? Or do other subject lines here send you into like an immediate emotional turmoil? Like, do you feel outraged or do you feel excited? Or do some of them here make you feel pretty confused? It looks like there's a call out for hustle and flow. First Trayvon, now this, someone is saying is the best subject line. Someone also likes food stamps. Yep, looks like hustle and flow is a pretty popular one. And that's cool because it's a pop culture reference, and so it's funny and it's interesting, and it's also talking about flowcharts. It's a joke. Looks like someone said the Rachel Maddow one. That would be appealing to them. Someone said they're confused by the election roller coaster. Yeah, definitely. So all of this is to say and to illustrate that subject lines are your first form of communication with your members and are also your first shot at telling your story. And I'm going to help you work on your subject lines so that they're creative and that they don't leave your users sort of confused or instead responding to their email from grandma. So subject line optimization can easily become an afterthought, and I recognize that. But I want to encourage you to think about subjects as the condensed soundbite of your email. People need to open your email before they read your inspiring story, so don't skimp on the creativity when it comes to different subjects. And just like the last example, or just like the example of the prisoners' rights campaign, don't rely on what you know. Just because a subject line hasn't worked in the past doesn't mean you can't use it or use an element of it to rework it into a new campaign. And the way that we keep things fresh here is by trying a subject line derby. And a subject line derby is where a group of people will generate as many subject lines about an email as possible within a few minutes. And at the end, everyone who participated votes on their favorites. And it's resulted in such subject line classics from change.org as, I regret our verdict, I accidentally bought a meth lab, I saved people from fire, now I have cancer, what my husband saw, and so many more. So I have to
say, Christiana, that I accidentally bought a meth lab is probably my favorite subject line ever. So thank you so much for this incredible walkthrough. I love the storytelling lens on optimization. And that's our last takeaway here is that optimizing your email with storytelling fundamentals is critical, even your subject lines. And I've also participated in a couple of subject line derbies, not nearly as many as our email team, but it's a lot of fun, and just even having a chance to flex your creativity and brainstorming muscles once in a while, I think is a worthwhile endeavor in and of itself, because who doesn't need more creativity in their lives? So we're going to wrap up now and get to your questions, but I just wanted to sort of reiterate how powerful email is. It's just an incredible tool and a really important channel for the work that we do here at change.org, and I think all of you understand the work that you're doing every day to engage supporters, get them to take action, get them to donate to your organization. Without email, we wouldn't see the response rates that we do. Obviously, social sharing is a big part of the activity that happens on change.org, but email drives a lot too. And we hope that the content we presented gives you some perspective on how we've been successful in building a list of nearly 50 million people. Hopefully there's some takeaways that you can use to improve your email program and to build your list over time. As you're building your list, many of you probably know, we certainly have a lot of our clients on the call, but if you're interested in using our paid services to help grow your list and connect with the right passionate and engaged supporters for your work, we do offer sponsored campaigns. Just really quick, how they work is that when someone starts a petition on change.org and they share it with their networks, new people come to change.org and they, as Michael Whitney said, we know what they care about. We know what they're signing. We know where they live. And we're able to put your campaign in front of those highly targeted users to make sure that you're getting access to an incredible community that is hard for you to reach in other ways. And those folks have the opportunity to sign your petition, to join your email list, and you can then cultivate them over time into donors and advocates that you need for your work. We'll be happy to talk to you about sponsored campaigns more offline. I'll have my contact information up in just a minute. But obviously, you can also start free petitions on change.org, and we have a lot of organizations doing that too. It's just a great, solid tool for you to use as part of your online campaigns. And the only other thing I'll mention is that we love to share information like this, and we have a regular webinar program that is designed to give you the knowledge that we have here and talk about some of the exciting things that we see happening in the nonprofit tech and online social good space. Next week we'll have one of our regular webinars about people powering your campaigns with online petitions. I'll be diving into some best practices for online petitions if you're interested in how to do that and do that for free on our platform. And then a really exciting webinar coming up in December with Greenpeace USA and Mobile Commons. We'll be talking about innovations in SMS campaigning and how you can get started in your adding more information about your list, finding SMS information for your users, acquiring new SMS users, and how to really engage on an exciting new and intimate channel that is still, I think, a challenge for a lot of organizations. So I'll be following up this webinar with an email with that information as well as a video of our webinar today. And now we have about 15 minutes, and I want to spend the rest of that time answering some of the amazing questions that came up during this, this conversation. Let's see. First question is from Jennifer Jansen. I'm surprised how small your team is. How do you manage with one producer for 100 petitions per week? Michael, thoughts on staffing for email programs and what you've learned in that area?
Yeah, it's a little lean. We cheat a little bit because we've developed a system where a significant portion of our emails for the local and niche program pull the content directly from the petition page. So we'll put in a petition URL, and the entire body of the email becomes the text, the petition headline on the page becomes the call out, the image becomes the image, and we don't have to actually set up and write 100 different campaigns. But it's still a lot. It's a big logistical challenge to send that many emails, and the spreadsheets and other systems we use to track all that is kind of dizzying. But yeah, it's not a big number of people at all. It's kind of tough. Yeah.
Well, I know you guys are always hustling, so thanks again for spending some time with us today on the webinar. Christiana, an email for you about storytelling from Garth Moore at the One campaign. He says, question on story, what someone wants or what they need, and isn't need more urgent and driving than what someone wants? Do you have thoughts on the difference between want or need?
Yeah, so I think what's important to know about the golden rule of storytelling is that it should be the framework for which you craft your stories. No, you're not going to send, or at least I hope you're not going to send a campaign to your users that's about something frivolous. So you wouldn't send a campaign where somebody really wants, I don't know, some material object or something. They really want something that maybe is not that important, and that's where other elements of email storytelling come into play, right? Like there needs to be high stakes in order for a campaign to be interesting and to compel people to take action. So the balance there is that they're not totally different, but that there's other elements of email storytelling that make your want a need, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. Yeah, I get it. And thanks for that question, Garth. Michael, a question for you about managing delivery and spam having such a large list. There's a question from Ryan Aquilina that says email lists of their clients are having more and more issues falling into spam despite best practices. We do have an email deliverability staffer here at Change.org that works with that. And Michael, I know you work with Alice really closely. Do you have any thoughts or best practices for folks to think about in the ever-changing deliverability world?
Yeah, it's another tough question. We do have we have an email deliverability manager based in the UK who looks at our worldwide deliverability. And the main thing that I would recommend is not trying to, we don't really care about necessarily sexual or drug content that you might assume would trip up spam filters. Honestly, one of the key things about deliverability is sending content that people respond to. And so the higher engagement you have with an email through clicks, mostly through clicks, the better off you're going to be for deliverability. And so it's about keeping people engaged, and we do separate out people who have not taken action in the last, I forget the number. You have to not respond to a certain number of emails over time, and it's a lot, before you get moved to a different queue where you get way less. So those two things help, but it's really just about making sure people respond to the emails.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that was Ryan's second part of the question is culling inactives from your list to keep deliverability rates up, and we're very much on top of that and pay a lot of attention to that. So thanks for the question, Ryan. So Jennifer Jansen asks, how do we create doable asks when we're working on huge issues like climate change, and the policy we're advocating for is just a step towards a solution, but will not really solve the solution on its own? I mean, and I think this is probably a question about theory of change, which I know Christiana is a big part of how you tell stories and how you frame emails.
Yeah, I'm just looking for your question right now in the chat so I can read it again. But
Yeah.
basically go ahead.
How do we create doable asks when we're working on very large issues? And the policy that we might be advocating for is just a step towards that solution. So actually, I think that for me, the question kind of answers itself. Whether it's a petition or an email, you always have to have an ask that is commensurate with change that can actually be made. Trying to engage people on an issue that is an incremental step towards that change, but explaining to them why it's important and making that part of the storytelling. That's from where I sit, what I see. But Christiana, you're the expert.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a great response. I mean, that is feedback that we're often working into our emails, is that we have to build change incrementally. And so even if, I don't know, I'm just going to use the animal example because it's fresh on my mind and we just talked about it. But even if you wanted every single pork supplier, or you wanted the FDA to ban the use of gestation crates across the country for all commercial pork production, it would be really hard to ask to just go from 0 companies or 0 brands having signed on to a policy like that to pressuring the FDA to do so. So it's more about breaking down the ultimate goal or the ask into more incremental or strategic asks that will get you there one step at a time.
Gotcha. Thank you. So question about, Michael, about some more deliverability. Any advice about handling Gmail's new tabs and anything that we've seen on our end about how we've approached that?
So with Gmail's new tabs, basically Google looks if you have an unsubscribe link if you're a list, and moves you either into updates or promotions. We actually we've seen a little bit of a drop, but not significant. The main thing, again, is making sure that you're sending good content, and when you do that, your users will seek it out. We've seen a little bit of a drop, and I've seen some industry things that point to, not organizational stuff, but commercial, that sees a bigger drop. We haven't seen that much of a problem, though. And I'd say about 50-50 we end up in either updates or promotions. It's not hard and fast, which is interesting as well.
Great. Yeah, I know that there's a lot of concern and confusion about Gmail deciding to manage our inboxes for us. But so a question about tips for growing non-U.S. users. And this is a little out of your wheelhouse, Michael and Christiana, since you're on the U.S. email team, but I know you also work closely and share a lot of best practices with our international teams. Anything you see differently outside the U.S. as far as response to email?
Not really. I mean, the thing is, it goes back to where the users are. Like, what's in the news? What kind of subject line based on what's going on will get to you. But for new users and growing the list, part of it really is creating content that people want to share, and you'll grow wherever you are. And the more that you can create the empathy that Christiana talked about, the more people are going to feel that what they're doing matters, and will want their friends to feel that same feeling. And so I don't think it's necessarily different outside the U.S.
Yeah. Universal principles.
Yeah, I just also wanted to say that some of our most international campaigns or victories have also been around campaigns that are U.S. specific. And so I think that really emphasizes that storytelling is a really effective mode of communicating campaigns, and it's communicating just like the importance of users taking action on an issue, even if it's something that's not even happening in their backyard or even in their country. And some of our most international campaigns have been Trayvon Martin, the Bully movie, the rating for Bully movie, lowering it from PG-13 to PG, which is really interesting because that's something that's like very specific to the U.S. And then there have been some bigger international campaigns that have really garnered a lot of support, like asking Apple to change their labor practices in China, and also around different political activists around the world, setting them free too from persecution.
Here's an interesting question from someone that sounds like they have a very specific audience they want to be talking to. Wilfred asks, can you build a list, for instance, striped bass anglers along the U.S. coast between Chesapeake Bay and Maine? How detailed can we get, Michael, with who we're reaching out to around targeting?
Yeah, we can get, I don't think we're that segmented yet, which surprises me. If you want to start a petition, I'd gladly see how we can do it. But if you are looking to build that kind of a list, it's really about sharing. One thing that we do is create, if you don't have people on your email list, forward an email that people can sign like they are on your list to your contacts. That really helps and get it. We're not that local yet, though you'd be surprised at what I know we have in terms of the tens of thousands of different issues.
And that actually brings up a good question about social sharing. Ryan asks, Ryan comments that their social media list is about 3 times the size of the email list, and wondering if there are strategies, maybe it seems like you just hinted at that, but strategies that Change.org uses to migrate social media users to email. Hosted petitions on Facebook, Twitter cards, and obviously our sponsor campaigns is a great way to do that, but are there any, our paid services of sponsor campaigns for supporter acquisition can help, but are there any tactics in crafting an email or a specific action that can help migrate people off of social media onto an email list?
Honestly, I found that people who come from social media are going to be less well-performing than people who come from peer-to-peer sharing over email. Or organic traffic from news. So the social media email, like the social media petition signing, is in terms of actual asks, it's not as big as straight email and otherwise organic.
Great. One final question back to you, Christiana, from Anne. She says, if you work on international development and have limited access to the original story, what ideas do you have for more effective storytelling with those constraints? So how do you boil a huge story down to nuggets that will resonate with your users?
That is a really good question, and we have also struggled with telling those types of stories as well when we can't just easily look somebody up on the internet and find their story that way. And my advice to you there would be to not only reach out to allied organizations to see if they might have connections to specific people, but also those organizations might have people who are of the demographic that you're looking for, who might be living in the U.S. doing that type of work now. But when you don't have, when you've exhausted all of those resources and you still haven't found anyone, I mean, sending a story about that person that's told through someone else is still an effective way of motivating people. But we have seen specifically at Change.org a really big difference in conversion between when the story is firsthand versus when it's secondhand. So I'm not saying through this presentation that it should only be firsthand. Firsthand is definitely preferable. But if you know of a really compelling story of somebody who lives in a country that you don't have access to and a story that you don't even have access to, you've just heard it through other people, then feel free to tell that story if you feel like you can tell it well. Otherwise, I would encourage you to stick with stories that you can convey the most clearly and the most directly.
Awesome. Thank you, Christiana, and thank you, Michael. We're at the hour mark, so I'm going to wrap up. I want to thank all of you for joining us. I hope that there were some nuggets of email excellence wisdom that you're able to take away from this. Really appreciate your time. If you want to find out more about the services we offer and the content we have, you can visit us at change.org/organizations. As I mentioned, we're always putting together great content to share what we know and just make sure that you're as informed as possible about petitions, online campaigning, et cetera, et cetera. We're also sharing that content on our social channels, Twitter at ChangeOrgs and Facebook.com/ChangeOrgs. That's content specific to nonprofit and organizational audience. Finally, my email is lawrence@change.org. If you want to find anything more out about our sponsor campaign services to find the best new supporters for your work, I'd be happy to talk to you. Please email me or shout at us on Twitter or Facebook. Most importantly, we would love to hear about the campaigns you're working on and share them with our audience. So with that, we'll wrap up. I hope to see you online again sometime soon. Michael and Christiana, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.